Hello friends, this is Dr. Sumiti Ahuja and I am Assistant Professor at Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. Now moving on to the next aspect which has been covered under section 11 in competency to contract, that is person of unsound mind. So it is telling you that a person who is of unsound mind is legally incompetent or incompetent under law to enter into a valid contract. So it says agreement of person of unsound mind is void under Indian Contract Act, unlike English law where it is voidable. Now in our first session we had discussed about definitions and we had covered till contract and void agreement, but we did not cover the concept of voidable. It will be covered later on as well, but just to tell you briefly what exactly is this term voidable. Now voidable means that, say for example, a person has committed a fraud against you and has made you into entering in a contract with that person, right? Misrepresented some information, made you believe something, and you believing in the truth of it, he intentionally deceived you and you got deceived and you entered into a contract with that person, right? But later on you got to know about the reality and you are no longer willing to continue in that contract, right? So voidable basically says when you have discovered that fraud, you have two options. The first option being you have a choice to continue. You have a choice to continue in the contract and let it be, even if the fraud was committed against you, you have come to this realization that this contract ultimately will prove beneficial to you. So if that person is getting more benefit, you are also getting benefited. So you are okay with it and you wish to continue. The second thing is, the second option in your hand is, fine, now I have discovered that that person committed fraud against me, and if he would not have committed that fraud against me, maybe I would have not entered into such kind of a contract with that person. So that second option gives you a choice to step back and do not perform any obligation under that contract, right? So voidable basically means you are getting two options. Wrong has been done against you, so you have two options, either to continue, no problem, I am okay with it, I live with that, or the second option is exercise your right and say I do not wish to continue and I do not wish to perform any obligation because you did not act in a correct manner. Now let us move on further. Section 12 of the Indian Contract Act, you see the systematic arrangement of the provisions. Section 10 states that persons should be legally competent. Section 11 tells you who are competent to enter into contract, and section 12 describes as to who is a person of sound mind. What do we mean by when we say person of sound mind? It is, section 12 states a person is said to be of sound mind for the purpose of making a contract if at the time when he makes it, he is capable of understanding it and of forming a rational judgment as to its effect upon his interests. If I may explain it to you in a slightly simpler manner, I would just try to tell you this thing that, see, what has to be seen is when a particular party is entering into a contract with another party, is that party capable of understanding the nature of the contract, the terms and conditions involved in the contract, what will be the consequence of that contract, will the terms which have been mentioned in the contract hamper the interest of this party, right? So this is what we mean by rational judgment. Rational judgment means this only, that you are able to understand what is right for you, what is wrong for you, and you know what is the nature of the act you are doing. Now section 12 is not limited to this part only, which you can see is in quotes, but it also goes on to say that yes, as a general rule, a person has to be, what is seen is, person is of sound mind, that is capable of understanding the nature, the consequences of the contract or the transaction in which he is entering into, But apart from that, further then it says, there may be two situations. First, person who is usually of unsound mind, occasionally of sound mind, may make a contract when of sound mind. See, when we study criminal law also, your Indian Penal Code of 1860, which now has become Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, they are telling you this thing, that basically there is a chapter related to general exceptions, which we also identify as general defenses. Now, there is one of the aspect covered under those general defenses, which is of insanity. Whenever we teach that concept to students, we always tell them that there is a difference between legal insanity and medical insanity. Medical insanity may mean that the person is suffering from mental issues, mental health is not proper, mental capabilities are hampered, right. Legal disability, legal insanity, if we say, what we are saying is, see, a person may be suffering from medical insanity, but if the condition of that person is such that there are times, there are intervals, there are periods when person is in a position to understand everything and appreciate the nature of every act that person is doing or what is done to that person. If in that particular situation a person does an offense, he will be held liable, he cannot take the defense of insanity, because when that person committed the act, irrespective of the fact that person is medically pronounced to be insane, but when that person did that act, he was very well in his senses. That is exactly the principle which we follow under the Contract Act also. It says person may be of usually unsound mind, but there would be those bouts, those intervals when he is capable of understanding the nature of contract, the nature of transaction in which he is entering into. And if in such circumstances a contract is entered into by that person with another person, it will be a valid contract, right. And similarly then the second aspect which has been covered is person usually of sound mind but occasionally of unsound mind may not make a contract when of unsound mind. We simply are trying to say that, see, there may be occasions that person is usually of sound minds, but that person gets fits, gets certain during certain intervals, that person becomes incapable of understanding what is or are his interests and may take some step which he would not even be able to appreciate has happened. In such situation, if any such kind of agreement is entered into, it is not valid in nature, it will be void. These are two examples, two illustrations from section 12 which have been highlighted, which are there on your screens. If we just go through them one by one, it starts with a patient in a lunatic asylum who is at intervals of sound mind. Remember, we just saw here, person usually of unsound mind, occasionally of sound mind, may make a contract when of sound mind. So, a patient in lunatic asylum who is at intervals of sound mind may contract during those intervals, because during those intervals he is of sound mind. A sane man, that is a person who is usually of sound mind, may be delirious from fever or is so drunk that he cannot understand the terms of a contract or form a rational judgment as to its effects on his interests. Because excessive drinking, obviously it hampers a person's mental capacities, mental capabilities, and in that situation if a person ends up entering into contract or signing any document, it may end up proving lethal against that person's interests. Because remember, one of the most relevant important requirements of a valid contract is that the parties have mutually agreed to the terms of the contract, or what we had discussed, consensus ad idem, agreeing on the same thing in the same sense. So, a person who is so drunk, pissed drunk, that he cannot understand what is happening around him or what is even written on that paper and just ends up signing that document, may prove lethal against him, against his interests. There is one judgment I have highlighted here, Chako versus Mahadevan. It's a 2007 judgment of Supreme Court, wherein Supreme Court has observed that unsoundness of mind is finding of fact. So what do we mean by this? It means that whether a person was of sound mind at the time of entering into a contract or not is a question of fact. What do we mean by is a question of fact? When we say it is a question of fact, we are trying to convey that it will depend or it will differ from case to case. It will depend upon the facts or circumstances of a particular case. This is what is meant by finding of fact. In this case, valuable land sold for paltry amount, that is very less amount, which did not justify the cost of that property. Now, it was proved through medical certificate that person was suffering from alcoholic psychosis. Supreme Court ended up setting aside that sale deed. Now, the third aspect covered under section 12, that is persons disqualified by law to which they are subject. So, the third aspect, as stated under section 11 of the Indian Contract Act, certain individuals are legally barred from engaging into contracts and therefore are incompetent to contract. That is, apart from minors and persons of unsound mind, there is this another category which says that there may be under any other law or any other legal rules, a person may have been declared to be incompetent or not capable of entering into a valid contract. Certain examples which we can see of those people who are legally disqualified from entering into a contract are alien enemies, convicts, insolvents, can be foreign sovereigns as well as ambassadors. Now, the Indian Contract Act is not stating these examples or is not mentioning that this is the restrictive category which is being referred under section 11, or when we say disqualified by law, we are only referring to these categories. These are few examples which I have mentioned here. Now, a person serving sentence in jail, that is a convict, if he ends up signing some contract during that period, it is void in nature. It is not valid. That means neither he nor the other party would be under any kind of obligation, would not be under any kind of legal compulsion to fulfill the terms. Now, then it says A, who belongs to say a country X. Herein I am telling you about the concept of alien enemy. So, A, who belongs to X country, places an order with B for certain goods. Now, B belongs to a different country. B is a person who belongs to another country named Y. The goods are shipped, but before they could reach their destination, X country declares a war with country Y, and now the contract which was entered between A and B will become void, because for A now, B and then vice versa as well is an alien enemy, because his country is in a state of war with another country. So, this person who is from another country becomes the alien enemy, and alien enemy, with an alien enemy you cannot enter into a valid contract.